Welcome to another episode of Pilots Say What, where we get to hear what pilots have to say. And today we'll be speaking with Cole. We'll go over, how his flight training journey felt to him, a little bit about what it was like becoming a CFI, maybe some of your goals and where you'd like to end up. And we'll talk a little bit about starting flight training and some of the mentality that goes into it and how to kind of maneuver that as well. But without without getting too far into it, Cole, would you mind introducing yourself for us?
Yeah, hey, I am Cole. Coleman's a full name, like you mentioned. I'm a CFI at Thrust. I got hired back in February.
Awesome.
I started flight training with Thrust back in September of 2024, and I've just been having a great time. It's like
Yeah.
the most fun and most stressful thing I've ever done.
Yeah, people say that flight training is not easy, which kind of
No,
sounds obvious to me.
no,
Was it more difficult than you expected it to be?
not particularly.
Hmm.
I think, you go into something that big, hopefully, with, the idea that it's going to take some work, right? You don't just get to sit back and, be a spectator in your own flight training.
Right.
You have to be an active part of it.
Mhm.
So, and if you come in with that energy, then hopefully your CFI is going to match you,
Right.
meet you halfway, and it's going to be a great time. But you just have to take it one step at a time. You can't just try to absorb it all at once, or you'll kind of explode.
Right. When did you first kind of start? Did you ever have to remember to slow down?
Oh yeah, all the time. I
Yeah.
think that's what I always wanted to just jump to the end of, like, just I wanted to be there, right? But
Hmm.
you have to take it every step of the ladder. And I
Right.
think I often had to remind myself, or if I wasn't where I wanted to be on something, that
Mhm.
sometimes just takes time.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you remember when you were first interested in starting flight training?
Oh yeah, it's been kind of a process. When I was a little
Yeah.
kid, my grandpa was really interested in aviation, particularly, like, the warbirds, old school stuff
Hmm.
from his childhood.
Hmm.
And he would take me to the museums, like the one we used to have here in Addison, or the one at Love Field,
Right.
even a couple kind of out of the city,
Hmm.
and old movies, stuff like that. So I've always been
Yeah,
interested in it,
it's cool.
but it never really did seem something, you know, attainable, if that makes sense. You're just always like, whoa, those guys, they're just, they just kind of are pilots, right?
Right,
You never
exactly.
see where they got there. They just like are. And I was like, that seems like something I don't know if how to even go about doing that.
Mhm,
And then fast forward many years, I was like 18, 19, and I had a
mhm,
buddy that just mentioned to me in passing one day. I'd known him for a while. He was like, yeah, my dad, uncle, grandfather, and myself collectively own this old school, like, 172, like a mid 60s plane.
yeah.
It's like, you ever want to fly it? He was a private pilot, so he was like, you just split the cost of gas and we can go fly. I was like, yeah.
Like,
So I spent
yeah.
like an entire summer just flying this little plane around out of Terrell. And that's when I was really like, okay, I like this. I need to start looking into this. So it took a
That's
while to
awesome.
kind of like figure out what route I wanted to go, where I wanted to go. Obviously, settled on thrust,
Mhm.
and yeah, I never looked back. It was great.
Yeah, I'm wondering if what you think would have happened if you didn't get the chance to fly with your buddy like that with the plane that they were collectively working on. I mean,
I don't know.
do you think it would have come full circle eventually, or how long would
Something
that have
tells
taken?
me I might have done it anyway. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, I have this feeling, like, the way I am now, it's like, you know what? I probably would have ended up doing that. Maybe not the same timeline.
Right.
You never
Right.
can tell, but
Exactly.
I'm glad it worked out the way it did.
That's really awesome. You're saying that that kind of helped you know that, oh, this is what I want to do. How long did it kind of take until you took your first steps to starting flight training? Maybe calling or even
Yeah,
touring.
so this is funny. I flew that little plane around 172. Obviously, that's a high wing, a little different than what we use here at Thrust.
Right.
At the end of the day, though, if you're comfortable flying something like our Archers, getting in a 172, obviously some of the speeds are a little different, stall speeds and
Hmm.
glide and all that. Just memorize the new numbers, but it all flies more or less the same. You got to get
Hmm.
used to it, but it's kind of like driving a Toyota Corolla versus a Honda Civic. Like, yeah, they're a little different, but it's just another one.
Right.
Um, but I flew that little plane around and had a good time with it, and then started looking around at flight schools.
Hmm.
Obviously, there's a number of them. I wanted to stay local. I live in Plano, so not too far from here.
Okay.
Um, and obviously, Dallas is a great place for flight training. I mean, there's just the airspace is busy,
Right.
but that gives you a chance to really, get your skills dialed in, right? Because you just
Yeah.
got to keep your situational awareness up. It's a busy, busy place.
And then being able to communicate with comms is just
Absolutely.
invaluable, and I'm sure it changes the way you think when you're in the plane if you're actually comfortable with doing so.
100%. I think that's one of the best things about training in a place like Dallas is if you were to go and do it in a rural area in the middle of, nowhere,
Right.
that's fine. You can learn the stick and rudder skills, not an issue.
Yeah.
But then you throw that pilot who's never talked to an approach control or anything just in the middle of the city, they might choke. I don't know.
Yeah.
Depends on how good they are.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so I flew a little plane around, started looking around at flight schools. At the time, thrust wasn't as big as it is now. Obviously, we're getting, we're growing. But
Absolutely.
at that point in time, we had Addison and I think Denison, and Conroe was like about to open that fall or December. I forget when that happened. But
right.
Reading just different reviews on it and, talking to some people I'd known, they highly recommended it. And I was like, you know what? This seems like a place that stands out to me just because unlike some flight schools that treat you kind of like a number, like a statistic, it's like we just want to like shove you through, just do it.
Yeah.
I feel like all the instructors I've known at Thrust and students, it's a great community, right? You have that support group and they treat you like an individual.
Yeah.
So that's a great thing.
Is that something you could pick up on just by, talking to us or going on a tour?
Absolutely. I'll be honest, I never did a tour.
Okay.
And that, in hindsight, maybe I should have. I don't know. I don't regret it.
Right.
The first time I really walked into Thrust was my day one.
Okay.
And I mainly did that because there's the option of getting a discovery flight, a great tool. If you've never flown a small plane, I definitely recommend it because it's considerably different than having been on an airliner or something.
Yes.
Still cool. But
plus, you get to take control
absolutely
of the controls, or you get to really see what it feels like.
For sure. So if you've never done that, highly recommend taking a disco flight before you ever try to jump into it, because you might find that as cool as it sounds, then you get really, really bad air sickness. Which don't let that deter you. I have CFI buddies working with me that had pretty bad air sickness, so that's not a be all end all, but just it's good to know how you react to things like turbulence and just the bumpier nature of a small plane.
Right.
But that being said, because I'd already flown small planes, I was like, oh, I already know I want to do this. Like, I didn't really had questions. So
yeah.
But
so you got here and you realized, okay, like I think I chose a good place.
Oh yeah, I mean, I walked in and I had a pretty big starting class. We had like 26 or 7 people, I think.
Yeah.
And
you said September of 2024?
September of 24.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big class.
Yeah.
And which that time of year always is, because it usually coincides with people's other school kind of semesters and stuff like that. Right. So I feel like fall and then January, beginning of the year, we always have pretty big classes.
Yeah.
And within 10 minutes of walking in this room, I was joking around with these dudes. I'm having a great time. I'm still good friends with a lot of them. So it's been a good community for sure.
I do remember that class. It was a big class.
Big.
There were a lot of people signed up for that one. Actually, we're having Thrust Day soon.
Yeah.
We're expecting to have a lot of people in the hangar that day. If you guys are listening and you're not aware what Thrust Day is, well, we're having Thrust Day anniversary. Monthly, we have a thing where we welcome our students, but on April 20th, we're having a really big one where we welcome our new students and we celebrate everyone's progress through the flight training program. But even more specifically, we're going to have games. We're going to have all the CFIs and students there. Friends and family are invited. We have a dunk tank, which was a big hit last year. This is just our way of celebrating in general what it's like to go through flight training and become an instructor and to move through your journey. So we're inviting you, if you'd like to come, check out admissions. They'll get you, a link so that you can RSVP and see what we really do here at Thrust Flight to make sure that our students and our CFIs feel special. You're familiar with Thrust Day, right?
Oh, yeah.
The last one?
I've been to pretty much all of them since I've been here. It's great. I mean, you get free food, guest speakers, sometimes fun games on these special ones.
Yeah.
And it's like the one time every month where the whole Thrust community comes together and just get to talk with each other. And it's just great, right?
Yeah. Are you going to be at this at the April 20th one, the Thrust Day anniversary?
I'll be there.
Okay, cool. Well, we're grounding the flights, so we're expecting to be there.
Yeah.
We're get to where everyone can go.
Cool.
I don't know how long we get to ground the flights. It's kind of expensive to do that, but that's how serious we want it to be. If you're someone who has been thinking about doing a tour at some sort of flight school, if you're near the Addison location, this Thrust Day anniversary on April 20th is open to tours. We want you to come check it out and see what it's like on one of the best days we're going to have for all our students in CFI. So hopefully we get to see you guys then. That's awesome. I'm wondering if you didn't do flight training, if there was something else on the table for you that you were looking at. Maybe I'll do this. Maybe I'll go to college. Maybe I'll go to this profession.
Yeah, I think the thing I had leaned toward the most beyond that was like mechanics. I'm a weird person in that I have too many hobbies. Like I just love doing things. I can never sit down.
I understand.
And so like I'm a drummer, musician, and I love doing that. But like that's one of those careers. It's like you don't really ask for it. It kind of just happens, right? You don't becoming a famous musician. Like you can't unless you're just
it's not easy
that
to
guy.
plan for.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then I'm also a mechanic. I love working on cars and stuff like that, which I find does lend itself well to understanding the systems of an aircraft. Like
that's
you
part
go
of the training.
Oh yeah, you have to know how it works and what lever does what and how it does it, right?
Right.
And I think teaching, especially in ground classes, those systems to my students is so fun because if you can really wrap your head around it, being able to explain it's great.
Yeah.
I'll take them down like I did last week to our maintenance hangar and let the students look at the airplane for maybe the first time with all of the engine cowling off, and they just get to like touch it and see it, and we'll even have some of the mechanics come over and show us all the parts and things that can go wrong and what to do if that does happen. It's a good time.
That's really cool. That's actually great. I think that's a great practice because I'm a very visual person as well, and I would imagine what it would do for me to actually be able to go to what we're talking about, especially when it comes to the systems. But that's interesting. So you do drumming. Do you still drum?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah, that's okay. Great.
It's like my I don't know, stress release, I guess. Go hit some drums, right?
Yeah, that sounds nice to me.
Oh,
I don't think I could have that many different rhythms in my head at once. It sounds really hard to do.
Yeah.
But do you do anything with cars or anything at the moment?
Just personal stuff. Like I have a couple of buddies in the neighborhood that I'm like their on-call mechanic, and I try to do all the work for like the cars at my house, my family's cars. So yeah, it's more of just a hobby, nothing like formal. But
yeah, no, that's cool.
It's fun.
I'm a pretend car guy. I have a car that I'm standard and everything, and I'm working on fixing some stuff on it now, and it's been a pain, and because I'm like I hardly know what I'm doing, but today I think I'm wrapping it up. So if I need any help, I might call you.
Hey, I'm around.
Okay, great. So I like the idea that you say you have a stress reliever because a lot of CFIs and students I talk to on the podcast talk about the importance of doing something outside of aviation. And to give that a little more context for our listeners and our viewers, this is a full-time program.
Yeah,
you're technically not even allowed to work. I say technically, you're not allowed to work. It's in the contract while you're doing this because we want your full attention and focus because this is a fast-paced program designed to get you started in your career as fast as possible. And we don't want, that's what we're trying to sell. And so we don't want anyone getting in the way of us trying to help you as much as we can, including yourself. That being said, how important is it to have something other than aviation, even though you're completely dedicated?
Oh, I think it's completely important, right? Because you can burn out really fast. I've seen it happen where people are just like at their wits' end about something. You're always going to have stress, right? Every time I was going in for a check ride, whenever I found out it got scheduled up until the 10 minutes before that check ride, I was just ball of nerves, right? It's going to happen. But I learned to accept it. It's going to happen.
Right.
Everyone reacts to that stuff differently. If you're the kind of person that can just be like, oh yeah, this is nothing, I got it, and you just walk in, then power to you. I'm not that person. I get pretty bad testing anxiety. So I would just have to sit there and breathe and sit with it for a while.
Yeah.
I know there's the old funny term, embrace the suck. That's kind of what it is. You just have to be like, this is how it's going to be.
You sit into that tension.
Yeah. And then, man, but it's so relieving when the way it worked for me is I would be super stressed. Moment I walk into the check ride and it starts, it would just go away. Not like the stress wouldn't go away, but my mindset would just shift. It'd be like, all right, I'm here now.
Mhm.
Nothing more I can do. Whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen.
Right.
And like that severe anxiety of it all would melt away, and I just try
Mm.
to just focus on the moment, right?
Right.
And I think that was a big help. But
Yeah.
more than just like check ride stress, your day to day stressors. You're gonna have flights that don't go the way you want to. Your landings aren't good.
Mhm.
Your instructor's like, come on, like we had that the other day. Like we know you know how to do this. Like I'm gonna
Exactly.
need
Yeah.
you to lock in a little bit.
Yeah.
And counterintuitive, but sometimes going home and just jumping right back into studying and trying to knock all that out right after you're done with a flight doesn't always help. Sometimes
Right.
you can overtrain and overthink and all of that. So
Mhm.
sometimes if I had a stressful day, I would, look at my schedule and see how much time I had until my next reservation, block, flight, whatever it was.
Right.
Go home and, run a couple of miles, go to the gym, play drums, being a musician. If you have
Right.
a hobby like that, if I had something to work on around the house or in my garage,
Mhm.
just do that. Something to just completely shut off your mind, mow the lawn. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just do something kind of mindless. It helps clear your mind, take a nice
Mhm.
hot shower, and then come back to what I have to do. And you just feel a lot more level headed and clear about what you need to do instead
Mhm.
of just kind of being foggy and stressed out, right?
I'm wondering what that is that does that. Well, you play drums, so
Yeah.
I'm sure you. And I feel like pilots can relate to these things pretty easily. But given someone who maybe does something like playing drums,
Oh, yeah.
the flow state,
Absolutely.
I think is something that pilots benefit a lot from. I don't know if there's something like what is it called? There's behaviors that you guys want to avoid. What are those called again?
Oh,
The
well, I mean, there's defense mechanisms and
Yes.
stuff like that where you just start kind of trying to remove yourself from the situation, but in an unhealthy way.
Right. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that maybe a flow state isn't something that is something to avoid. But the reason I bring it up is
Yeah.
because when it comes to getting like nervous, and then you talk about when you get in the plane and it's time to kind of start doing the thing instead of just
Hmm.
anticipating it. I feel like that same relief is can be similar to maybe something like playing the drums.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's any any connection you can draw there at all, or if I'm just reaching.
Well, and you need to talk about that the flow state thing. I think that is helpful if you're doing it right. If you
Hmm.
get in the plane and your idea of the flow state is not paying attention and you just feel like I'm just up here, doing it, then maybe you can get yourself in trouble, get
Right.
what we call behind the plane, right? Like
Hmm.
you're not doing things in a timely manner and then
Right.
you're getting overwhelmed by it.
Okay.
But if you are in the state of like, all right, I know what I'm doing, you do it, you verify with the checklist if that's
Hmm.
applicable for the situation.
Right.
It's the little things that will
Yeah.
get you or set you apart, right?
Hmm.
Making sure you have the right frequencies, not only in the nav or comms for what you're using,
Right.
but anticipate the next one you need. Have that ready to go. So
Hmm.
whenever a controller tells you over to departure or over to tower, you don't have to go find that frequency and put it in. It's just
Hmm.
there.
Right.
Stuff like that. That's what I would consider the aviation flow state, right?
Yeah.
Just having everything 2 or 3 steps ahead of where it needs to be,
Hmm.
to where you've already helped yourself succeed, right? You're just
Right.
ready for the next thing, and that's a big thing.
I feel like overthinking is what keeps that from happening.
Hmm.
And I guess to your point, it's counterintuitive to maybe go home after a tough day to where you got a lot to work on, and maybe do something other than work on it.
Yeah.
And I've always like struggled like, how do I know when, right? But
Hmm.
I realize is your brain even really working right now? Is it getting stuck at the first step? If so, take a breather, like you said, do something that gets your blood pumping and your brain moving,
Hmm.
and maybe you're more likely to have a successful study session. But also preparation. Um, what does it look like to prepare so that you can get in the plane and do what you were talking about, be a couple steps ahead?
Yeah, when you're especially doing, I'd say like the private and then later commercial, when you're learning
Hmm.
these maneuvers, maybe for the first time,
Yeah.
the biggest recommendation I can give you for flight training is look at the maneuver guide
Okay.
and do your best to, one, memorize the steps for each maneuver,
Okay.
and then chair fly it, which no one likes chair flying. You feel ridiculous doing it because you're
Yeah.
just like reaching for things that aren't in front of you and you're just
Hmm.
kind of closing your eyes and pretending it's there.
Right.
But I promise, as weird as it feels,
Mhm.
it translates beautifully to flight training.
Like that.
Because first, in private pilot, you've potentially never done these maneuvers in a plane at all.
Right.
So at least being able to talk out loud, what you're going to be doing
Mhm.
before you do it, or even as you're doing it, you're already a step ahead.
Mm.
Trying to learn the steps to a maneuver in the plane for the first time, you're kind of just wasting your own time.
Mm.
So if you can go into the plane and you've never done a steep turn,
Mhm.
but okay, first pre-maneuver checklist, and then this airspeed, bug
Right.
my heading, pick an outside reference, you know, whatever trim I need, then roll into it. Like
Yeah.
if you know what you're gonna do, even if you've never done it, you can look over your instructor and be like, okay, so I know I need to do this, this, and this. Like,
Yeah.
is it like just do it, or like, is there anything you can tell me about it?
Right.
And then you can have a conversation about, yeah, I can demonstrate one for you,
Mm.
or you can just try it, and then I can see where you're at and go from there, right?
Yeah.
So knowing at least what's coming is a big thing.
Mhm.
So if I had my instructor would tell me, even in commercial, if I knew the maneuvers pretty well and I felt like I could just do them, it's like,
Right.
yeah, we're gonna hit all the upper air stuff. I'd go through and chair fly all the maneuvers the night before, as knowing as it could be.
Mhm.
I'd just do it because I knew it would make my flight the next day even better.
Yeah.
Then you get to something like CFI rating,
Mhm.
and you have no choice but to talk out loud. You're going to, or you're not going to pass your stage checks, because
Yeah.
that maneuver or that rating is not about can you do the maneuvers to ACS standards.
Uh-huh.
It's can you do them to ACS standards while teaching them at the same time.
Yeah.
So, like with my commercial student and any other students I'm going to have, I try to emphasize, even if you don't like it, try talking out loud what you're doing. You might feel
Right.
kind of like a fool if you're just spitballing while you're doing it, but I promise it's helpful, because later on down the road, you're going to have to do it either way. If you
Mhm.
can get in the habit of it, then it makes later ratings so much easier.
Right. Okay. I think that I've always heard people talk about chair flying
Mm-hmm.
as something they had to understand was important at some point, and
Yeah.
maybe they didn't emphasize it early enough in their training.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit about when you were going through your flight training? Was there a time when you felt like maybe you were getting stuck or plateauing in your flight training?
I think, yeah, multiple times. I'm trying to think of anything in particular, but there's
Mhm.
usually a point in almost every rating, I think, for most of us,
Mm.
that maybe one maneuver or one type of approach in an instrument rating, right? Or
Mhm.
just something that you're not getting, or at least not to the level that you want. And
Mhm.
it's frustrating for you and sometimes your instructor, because you're like, man, I'm trying to find new ways to figure this thing out. And there's a number of things you can do. I mean, good old YouTube. You can watch people doing it.
Right.
Videos. We have a number of maneuver videos out now that you can watch someone else demonstrating it, see if there's any tips on there.
Right.
Read FA documents, as much
Mhm.
as we love doing that, right?
Mhm.
Uh,
I mean, this like YouTube is even slightly unconventional, all the way down to like a book that was written by the FAA almost.
yeah,
And so
there's always a way.
there's unconventional methods. I mean,
Hmm.
I'll go to Google,
Oh,
and
for
figure and
sure.
Google people talking about it. But yeah,
Yeah, but I mean, just knowing that there's never just one way to approach something is important.
right.
If the way you're doing it is not working, try maybe thinking about it a different way. If
Yeah.
you need to, talk with your instructor and maybe just have a flight with another instructor. We're
Right.
fine with that. It's not like a no.
Right.
It's like, okay, sure, get a different opinion. It's not that I can't instruct or the guy next to me can't instruct, but
Mhm.
maybe the way he's teaching it to his student
Yeah.
is just not clicking with him, or vice versa. So,
Yeah.
trade off a student for a flight or so and see if that gives them a new perspective on it.
Right.
Sometimes it helps.
Is there maybe a type of maneuver or something specific you like helping people get through or learn?
Ooh, helping people get through or learn. I think the one maneuver I struggled with a lot,
Mhm.
like back in commercial, and I think it was a patience thing, was the lazy eight.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people say that because it's a dynamic maneuver. It's the
Mhm.
only maneuver where your control surface pressures and what you're doing is constantly changing. You're never
Mm.
just still
It's
with
not about maintaining
any.
it. Yeah.
No, because I mean, you have a maneuver like a chandelle where it's, constant something and changing something else. So you only
Mhm.
have like one variable, right? Like you'll
Right.
have for that maneuver, it's going to be constant bank changing pitch, and then you hold the pitch and then change the bank. So you're keeping something constant. But with a lazy eight, it's just flowing all the way through it.
Yeah.
And if you try to over control the plane,
Mhm.
then you're going to be out of standards. If you try to under control the plane, you're going to be out of standards.
Mhm.
So I think that maneuver is great for teaching students how to feel what the plane is doing. You can feel the tendencies it has to, overbank, or
Mhm.
as airflow goes or increases over the wings, it wants to kind of correct itself back.
Mhm.
That's one of the better maneuvers for understanding the plane itself. And I think
Right.
that's a harder one for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I don't think I got decent at them until late CFI training.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it takes a while for some people. And the same things that were difficult for me might be super easy for someone else. We
Right.
each have our own, you know, struggles and then strong points. So,
Right. Is there? I mean, you said you kind of like helping people with that one. It's because it kind of is a big opportunity to learn how it feels to fly the
and I
plane.
think something about you teaching a maneuver you really, really struggled with
Okay.
is great, because if a maneuver was really easy for someone and they just did it effortless
Hmm.
and it was great every time, they didn't have to go in and think about it too much.
Yeah.
But when you're struggling with a maneuver, you spend so much time just going on a deep dive about it, and you learn a lot more about it. Not
Right.
only how to fly it, but the principles behind it, and like
Hmm.
just you cross examine it to the point where you can explain a lot of detail.
Yeah, you've come to consciously understand it on a
Mhm.
level that some people don't have to if it was
Yeah.
natural to them, and so it makes it easier to speak to when it comes to having to teach someone.
Yeah.
I can imagine that. I've actually felt like there's always this point in the conversation where um, there's always something that someone. I feel like typically what people like teaching the most is what they struggled with the most. I feel
Yeah.
like it's a pretty common thing, and it's because of what you just said, and no one's really put it quite like that yet. So I agree with you.
Mhm.
What I want to do is zoom out a little bit. There's a few questions I have for you, but
For
one of them
sure.
being you're private,
Yeah.
right? You come in, you don't. Well, you did a little bit of flying
Just a little bit.
before. Um, how did your private go? How long did it take you to get through private?
So private, I'd have to go back to my logbook to look at the exact hours now.
Yeah.
It was somewhere in the mid 60s, I
Okay.
believe. 60 hours, probably closer to 70.
Hmm. Our
So
our minimum is I think with the here is we're able to do it in like
like
40, right? But
yeah, it's
that's
like
like
35, 40.
yeah, but that's an
It
insane.
happens. It is almost unheard of, but it happens.
Yeah.
So I think the average is right around 70 or so for us. I'd have to look at that again, but
Right. Right.
that's what I hear. And I really enjoyed it. It
Mhm.
was so September was when I started,
Mhm.
and then I got my private pilot certificate very early January of 25.
Okay.
So it was just a little over 3 months. Honestly, if it wasn't that time of year,
Mhm.
I probably could have compressed it down into two or so,
Right.
just because so September and October and even early November of that year is great weather.
Yeah.
But then I don't know if you remember that year much, but like mid-November all the way through to December and January, it was just like low ceilings
Mm.
clouds wise,
Yeah.
and just rain, and the weather got bad. So there was actually a lot of downtime where we couldn't fly.
Mhm.
And unfortunately that happens, right? Like it
Right.
doesn't affect you. You're not paying more money necessarily if you
Yeah.
get, grounded for weather.
Mhm.
It's just one of those things. Weather controls our business.
Right.
So,
In case anyone is listening, by the way, people may be averaging around 60, 70 ish
yeah.
hours for their private, even if our minimum is 40. If you're hearing that and you're already someone who's looked into flight training and you're like thinking about the money and Part 61 and
Yeah.
things like that, just so you're aware, and if you know anything about this and I'm mistaken, then you can correct me. But
Mhm.
um, when I talk to our admissions team, the way that I understand it is we budget that in
Oh, absolutely.
to your payments and your loans, so that way if you do go a little bit over our minimum, that you're not getting charged more. That's part of the money that we are charging you in the first place, and you actually get it back if you
Mhm.
if you were to fly through our program and you met everything at minimums, you're gonna get money back towards your loan, and you won't owe for the whole loan.
That's
I
completely
just like
true.
to make that clear for
Yeah.
people who are listening who might be getting in the weeds about that right now.
No, so like the minimum we have for each rating is different just based on what you're going through
Mhm.
because I'd say like private and commercial are some of the longer ones. It just depends on what you're doing and how many maneuvers or, procedures there are to learn.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the maximum, and I say maximum allowed, you can go over that too. There's
Because we even have an extra
an
overage
overage. Yeah.
allowance to account for times when you take a little too long on a
Hmm.
rating.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But that being said, the maximum allowed that's budgeted to your normal like loan or just payment
Hmm.
is like usually double, if not over double, what the minimum is. So
Right.
it could be a considerable amount going back to you if you are just really flying through. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I just like to put that out there because I was actually talking with someone. I don't know if this was early on in the podcast or maybe it was just a pilot out at the school, but someone had come from another school and they quoted them a tuition price that was set for them to be able to, that's how much it would cost if they hit the minimums at everything. And they were
Hmm.
also an accelerated school. So it's not realistic to hit the minimums all the time,
No,
to
no.
expect it all the time. And so they were having to come out of pocket every time they didn't do something at a fast enough pace,
Mm.
and they weren't expecting that. And it's one reason why they switched over to our school.
Oh.
And it sounds like I'm making this up. I don't remember who it was. It's been a long time ago since I had that conversation, but
No, that definitely
it's
sounds like a scenario that could happen. I think
yeah.
that's something that sets Thrust apart is the transparency of it all and just the upfront nature of how we
Hmm.
operate. I mean, some of those schools they advertise maybe a suspiciously low rate, and you're like, I wonder why.
Yeah,
And they'll be like, no, it's great because you're a great guy. You're gonna go through minimums, but like that doesn't always happen.
yeah, yeah.
You have to be realistic with it, and I
Hmm.
think it's not to put yourself down. You'll hear something a lot. It's comparison is the thief of joy. If
Yes.
you're comparing yourself to someone that maybe went through private 10 or so hours quicker than you, what is that doing for you? No.
It doesn't. It doesn't
Just
do anything. Yeah.
learn what you need to learn
Hmm.
the way you need to learn it, and
Hmm.
it'll all be okay.
And that's one reason why I do like to ask about how long it took for you to get through private, especially as a CFI now,
Yeah.
right? You're in a position where people would like to get to, and people always ask in the comments, how long did it take to get through
Mhm.
private? The common answer here at Thrust, which is still actually really fast, is maybe 2-3 months.
Mhm.
Some people might do it a little less, and good for them. One thing I want to fast forward to asking about is what was it like transitioning into your CFI? You're a student. We're at a fast-paced program. You only
Mhm.
spent so much time flying, and all of a sudden, you're responsible for teaching other people to fly a plane. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I had a little bit of a buffer zone, which was cool for me to kind of try to change my headspace on it.
Hmm.
So I completely finished our program,
Okay.
really early November of last year. Like that was the end of my multi-engine add-on,
Right.
all of that, and then we didn't just because of the holidays and everything going on, and the airlines were kind of not hiring at that time. They didn't have any hiring for a month or two,
Okay.
and so we all kind of got like just held on. Luckily, I was a ramper, so I was working at our airport, just doing busy work and taking care of all of the operational needs that, helping dispatch, right?
Right. Right.
And Irma and student services, we just do all the odd jobs. It's actually really fun.
Yeah.
Um, but we ramped for a couple of months. I say we, meaning a lot of the CFIs that got hired with me.
Hmm.
And early January, we all took our HR interviews and then the simterview part.
Uh-huh.
And then you pretty much there's a couple options: an immediate hire, sorry, we have candidates we think would fit the role better, or you have the holding pattern, which is
Hmm.
about a month of we want to hire you, but we don't have a spot open. Hang tight, we'll let you
Hmm.
know.
Okay.
So in that month, there were like 40, maybe over 40 interviews for
Wow.
4 spots. And it was like, we're all like, oh my gosh, it's kind of terrifying. You're
Yeah.
like, what are
Absolutely.
the odds here?
Yeah.
And so 2 people that were already in the holding pattern got hired, and then 2 of the guys that interviewed with us got immediately hired.
Mm.
And then a couple of us got put in the holding pattern. You sit around, ramp for another month. You're just kind of like, well, how's it going to go?
Yeah.
And then we got those emails, those calls really early February that,
Right.
congrats, we'd like to bring you on. And that's when your mind is like, wow, like it's real. I have to be the instructor now. Like you have
Right.
those FAA ratings, and that's great,
Mhm.
but the FAA can't change your headspace, your mindset. So you have to kind of go in and just take a deep breath and make sure you are even more organized than you thought you needed to be,
Yeah.
right? It really, the things you start to look at are far and away more than you think.
Right.
You know, with our maybe the FSP systems, that for people that don't know this, Flight Schedule Pro,
Yeah.
it's just how we keep ourselves organized with flights and grounds. You know, there's more to learn there
Yeah.
on the operational side of it, the housekeeping stuff. Um, and of course, there's safety, right? Like you're responsible for yourself, a
Exactly.
student, and a really expensive piece of machinery that you're flying sometimes, you know, across states.
Right.
My first flight ever was a ferry flight, takes people to a check ride. You
Mhm.
know, that was cool. It was like, all right, you know, I'm sitting in a black shirt now. You know,
Yeah.
I'm kind of the guy that's in charge of maybe the route or making sure we have fuel and everything, and that was cool.
Yeah.
But the first time I got my commercial student, like first flight ever,
Yeah.
they're like, "You're going to Falcon Field in Phoenix, Arizona." I was like, "Awesome!" So I
That's
was
great.
like, I tell you what, I would say nervous, but I was excited.
Yeah.
But I made sure I like double, triple, quadruple checked
Yeah.
all of everything I had, the weather, the plane,
Mhm.
the route. You know, I made sure to go over to the chiefs and be like, "Hey, does this look good? Is there anything you see that I need to adjust?" And
Mhm.
you know, once you get through two or three people and they all like, "Yeah, it looks good," then you're
Yeah.
like, "All right, let's go."
Right.
And then, much like a check ride, you're kind of
Yes.
nervous about it. You're like, "This is something. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know how this is gonna go." And then you get in the plane, and then you're just like, "Oh, I know what I'm doing. We
Right.
just do it." So
I, I hear you talking about that, and a lot of different things come to mind. You know better, not better, but you know just as much as anyone else that getting a job as a CFI after getting your essential ratings will is can be a little nerve wracking.
absolutely.
Um, one thing I wonder about is if you were considering getting a job anywhere else because you were kind of in the holding pattern, right? Um, I guess I'll start there.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
honestly, my mindset on it was thrust or bust at the
Yeah.
beginning. My
Yeah.
plan really was go through the thrust interview process
Uh,
and you know see what I get there, and
yeah.
then if you know I got
Rejected or something.
nothing
Yeah.
rejected, yeah, then I'd change my angle and go find something else. I have friends that did. A couple are working
Right.
different jobs in the Dallas Metroplex. A couple moved home because we have a number of people that'll stay in student housing,
Right.
and so they're from other parts of the country. And got a friend that's a flight instructor in upstate New York. He went through the program with me.
Mhm.
Got a couple in West Texas. So there's always options.
Okay, good. And I think that that's almost like something that a lot, I've heard a lot of CFIs or even maybe senior people talk about. They'll say, "Be willing to make certain moves if you have to. If that means you get to the airlines, if that means you get a job, you get to make a little money, you get to build hours, and you get to go to the next step for yourself. You might have to be willing to do something like that, but you didn't have to cross that bridge. I'm glad that you're here
No,
with us at
yeah, no,
Thrust.
it's awesome. And I mean,
Yeah.
they ask you in the interview too, right? We have more than one location.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm working at Addison, but
Hmm.
um, you guys know we have Conroe, we have Sherman Denison, we have Phoenix. So, and then
Right.
pretty soon, Spinks, Fort Worth. That'll be
Yeah.
cool.
Exactly.
So, like when you're going for the interview, they ask you what locations would you be willing to work at,
Hmm.
and you can always say, "I want to work at Addison, and that is all I'm willing to work at."
Yeah.
Or you can say a couple of them or all of them. And it's kind of a balance because, like, if you go in and you're like, I want a job, I'll work at any of them.
Right.
Well, maybe that does increase your chances of getting hired, and that's cool.
Right. But then,
But then if you just do that and say it without much thought, and then you get hired for Phoenix,
right.
and you're not prepared to move out to Phoenix, Arizona, if you're
Right.
from Dallas, that can present an obstacle.
Hmm.
Personally, I said I would prefer Addison. I would
Right.
be willing to work up in Denison.
Right.
It's like an hour, maybe a little over an hour commute. I was like, that's still, to me, it would have been worth it for uh, an aviation, job. But
Absolutely. Yeah.
I didn't have to deal with that, which
Yeah.
is great. But I was fully prepared to.
Right. And one of the other things that had come to mind was you talk about you double, triple checked on what the
Oh yeah.
flight plan would be and how you're going to handle getting out to Mesa, Arizona, or Phoenix,
Mhm.
Arizona, with your first commercial student. Um, it it's great because it's not likely that you get to that position without having to practice that skill first, right?
Absolutely.
Not just flight plans, but the idea of how do I make sure
Mhm.
that I've covered as many bases as I can, and I guess that's when I heard you saying it, I was thinking to myself, if I was a student or about to be a student, and I heard you say that, I'd be thinking, man, I got to get good at that now. I
Mhm.
got good at the preparation thing, like as soon as possible, because that's what it's going to take to be a CFI. I feel like,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And I think it's great, you know, I talked about my side of the flight planning
yeah,
part, but you really do want to involve your students with that.
yeah,
So, I knew the lessons we needed to satisfy in that trip. So I knew we
uh-huh.
needed basically 3 cross countries kind of combined into one flight.
Hmm.
We just need to log it based on like different landings we did.
Right,
This stretch was to satisfy this requirement, this stretch
absolutely,
for that, and then so on and so forth.
yeah,
So I told him, I was like, these are the things we're going to get done.
hmm,
Here's the list of kind of approved airports we can work with along the route.
okay,
And here are some of my ideas. What ideas do you have? Are there any things you'd like to do?
hmm,
So you have to involve your student with the plan. You can't, if you just give them a text or a call and say, here's what we're doing,
show up at this time,
that's cool. They're going to enjoy that. But at the end of the day, they're here to learn.
yeah,
So we need to make sure we're doing our due diligence and keeping everything safe and planned well.
yeah,
But we want to include them in the planning process. And a great thing is just saying, hey, you go plan a flight all
yeah,
the way out to this location. And then, 4 flights cool. You can just like send flights to people, or
that's
if you're
actually
with
cool,
them,
yeah,
like the route anyway. And
hmm,
we look it over and decide on what altitudes we're cruising at, how much fuel we need to take,
hmm.
all of that. So,
My experience is that not figuring out details ahead of time and always relying on doing things in the moment, which I
mhm.
love to do.
Yeah,
It
sometimes.
it's kind of like a missed opportunity to kind of like do the thinking exercise that
Yeah.
actually helps you become a little bit better.
Yeah. I
Uh,
always like
yeah,
to say if you fail to prepare, you're preparing to fail, right?
exactly.
If you think you're just going to go in and wing it, it doesn't always work, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not saying try to control everything,
Right.
control what you can control.
Hmm.
There's some things that are just out of your control,
Yeah.
but to the point that you can,
Right.
try and make sure you've at least thought about all of these factors.
Yeah, I've been thinking about the concept of the bare minimum, which has a negative connotation,
Mhm.
which I personally have been kind of hanging on to lately. The phrase is like, to me, what is the bare minimum I really need to have done so that I don't over control it? Because I have a hard time finding the appropriate amount of
I get
control to
that.
try to exercise. Right? Sometimes I'll do too little, or sometimes too much, and that's just the way it's gonna be sometimes.
Mhm.
But if you can ask yourself, what is the bare minimum I need to know? Altitude, like you said,
Mhm.
proper places to stop, so that you don't get task saturated. I can imagine it's probably a good thought process to have.
Yeah,
Yeah. I want to zoom out a little bit more.
for sure.
I have a few more questions,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
one of
absolutely.
them is, what do you imagine that you want to do in aviation long term?
Long term, I'd love to go to the airlines. That's kind of like what I'm looking at.
Hmm.
Career wise, that's kind of the end goal as far as what's gonna be. And I know we all love flying. It's why we do it.
Hmm.
If you're in this business and you hate flying, then it becomes a job, right?
Hmm.
And not that it's bad to have a job. It's really good, but then you feel like you're really working. And if you're not enjoying it, you know,
You're just
it's
working.
unfortunate for you.
Yeah.
But I think if you really enjoy flying, it's a great career.
Hmm.
And flying airlines, obviously, it helps you just stay steady
Hmm.
financially, right? You don't
Right.
have not too many worries. Obviously, things like furloughing, all that happens. So it's good to have a couple of other things going on.
Right.
But that's the end goal for career.
Okay.
Now, on the other side of that, like education and flying wise, I'm kind of just hungry for all of it. I want
Right.
to get more ratings. I want to get high performance tailwheel, you know, work more multi engine stuff.
Hmm.
Heck, like once I'm flying an airline can actually afford to do things like this, I'd love to maybe figure out a way to join like the commemorative Air Force guys and fly
That's
old
awesome.
like 40s warbirds. Like I just love the
That'd be
idea
cool.
of flying really cool things
Yeah.
and not just treating aviation like a 9 to 5 job, like treating
Right.
it like a passion, right? Another hobby. Because if
Mhm.
you're working in one of your hobbies, you're just having a good time. It's
Yeah.
the way to do it.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And you know that's what our program's for. It's
Hmm.
obviously career focused, and so a lot of people do want to get to the airlines, and sometimes you know you take those little steps to get where you need to go. But
Yeah.
I always like to ask that just to kind of see
Hmm.
what path people are looking to take and what motivates them. That's awesome to hear.
Hmm.
You know, if I were to again zoom out a little bit more and we go back to the beginning, there's only like maybe one major hurdle we haven't really talked a lot about, which I wanted to cover because we were talking about money earlier.
Yeah.
You know, people worry about paying for flight training.
Hmm.
People worry about, you know, being able to get through flight training. And then people worry about being able to get a CFI job.
Of
And then people
course.
worry about being able to get the job they ultimately want. Right. And we've talked a lot about all those things, but I want to ask you, you know, you like being prepared.
Hmm.
You kind of have an idea of what you wanted to do. How come it wasn't a little too scary to think about how much it costs because it's expensive? And
Yeah.
me personally, I'm like, how could I do that?
Exactly.
Mm,
So for flight training, I did take out a loan,
okay.
and I mean that is a scary thing, right? Like
Yeah.
signing that paperwork, it's like, man, this is like
Yeah.
it's real.
Right.
But it does a couple of things to you, I think. And I have buddies that went through flight training that, self-pay. Maybe their families are just well off enough where they can do it. And if
Yeah.
you can, that's awesome. Like,
Right.
it's power to you.
Hmm.
But if you can't, it's not putting flight training out of your reach. That's not
Right.
a thing.
Right.
The old "where there's a will, there's a way" is quite true
Yeah.
because you get the loan, you make sure you're looking over everything and you're not getting yourself in a bad situation. Like,
Mhm.
obviously, look over the details, but
Yeah.
then you start flight training and pay the minimum you have to for the time. I don't recommend doing more than that because the only job you can have during flight training is ramping,
Mhm.
working at the airport.
Mhm.
And I mean, I use that for, like gas and food and stuff like that.
Right.
So there's always that option. But even now, like, pay the minimum you can. And I say that
Mhm.
as a flight instructor
Yeah.
because, you need to save
Because
money.
you're
And
like on the hook for payments
yeah,
about what 6 months or so after or something
yeah.
like
And
that.
there's, if you really, really have to, there's options like through admissions and operations where you can like push it back a little farther if it really is going to be a burden.
Hmm.
But, ideally, because of interest and all that stuff, you want to start paying it as soon as you can if you're
Yeah.
able to.
Hmm.
Don't let it put you in a point where you don't have food to eat, but,
Yeah. Yeah.
do what you can.
Hmm.
And then, like, buddies I have that are all in the airlines now, I know a couple of them, like instructors that were black shirts when I was starting out.
Yeah.
You start getting more money, maybe for the first year or two
Yeah.
of flying for an airline, still continue to pay what you have to and save up some stuff. Then you get that comfort zone
Yeah.
and start paying well over what you have to,
Right.
and you'll pay it down a lot faster than you think.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I asked that because I think what will happen a lot is people know that's like what they would like to do. They if the money wasn't involved, I mean, I guess if the money wasn't involved, you could do anything, right? But they know that's what they want to do, and then it's like, oh, how am I supposed to pay that much every month on a
Yeah,
loan that I just took out when I'm only CFIs aren't making like money like an airline
not
pilot
airline
would,
money. Yeah,
right? And so it's like, how do I do that? What people do is they find situations that allow them to do it, right?
yeah.
They'll live with someone,
Mhm.
whether it be family or a friend. I mean, I've had people tell me that they slept on a couch for
Yeah.
as long as they needed to because they had faith that when they got to the airlines, it would all work out. Now, maybe that's not for everyone.
Mhm. Of course.
I'm saying though, if there's a will, there's a way. And
Yeah.
I wanted to know about. Oh, I guess I wanted to mention that whatever that situation is.
Mhm.
I mean, imagine being an airline pilot, but you're just stay in that situation a little bit longer. I can
Yeah.
imagine you could make a dent on some of those
Of
payments.
course. And
So
that's like I'm blessed to have like I live with at home with my
okay.
dad, stepmom, stepsister, stepbrother, lots
Mhm.
of dogs, couple of cats. I
Mhm.
have a snake. So we just have like a big community there, and
Yeah.
it's cool to have that support group because you're not worried about, oh shoot, do I buy food, gas, pay my loan, or pay my rent? Like, you
Yeah.
if you can have a situation where you can live at home, that's great. Obviously, we have student housing here, so if you have to move and come
Mhm.
here, and
Mhm.
that's also factored into your loan, so
Yeah.
you can work it out if you
And we
have
have
to.
stipends.
Yeah.
The stipend for some people who take out a little extra on the loan just so they can live without
Mhm.
having to work, that kind of thing, depending on
Yeah.
what kind of support you may or may not
Of
have.
course.
But okay, well, one last question
Of
about
course,
that
dude.
then. when you what does someone need to know when they're going into maybe they're considering starting flight training
Mhm.
and they're like, where do I start? There's the disco flight, of course, and
Mhm.
there's like calling admissions, but like, what did you not know about getting started in flight training or getting a loan that you now know that maybe you would like to have told yourself in the
Let's
past?
see. That's a great question. I'd say a lot of it was like, when you're looking at something from a third person perspective,
Mm,
um, you just don't know how much there is. Because like I think a lot of people outside of the aviation community, you look at a plane and it's like, oh, it's like a car in the sky or something like that, right? They
yeah,
just like they're looking outside.
yeah,
It's like there's a lot of minutia in what we do. There's tons of different instruments and they all can interconnect with each other and you
mhm,
can pick up on things just based on, oh, this instrument's doing that. That's interesting.
right,
Let me find out more about that using this one, right? So
right,
I was surprised at just how much information you're getting all at once. The like just the old drink from a fire hose. That's kind of
right,
what it is at the beginning. You're like,
yeah,
whoa, there's so much to think about in the plane, outside of the plane, all of
mhm,
that. And you get more comfortable with it. You absolutely
right,
do. But at first, you feel just completely overwhelmed.
mhm,
I'd say the first month or so of training, you're gonna have those moments. You're like, man, am I cut out for this? Like
right,
you're going to have it. Just push through. Just keep going.
yeah,
Right? That's all you can do.
mm,
You're not gonna be comfortable all the time throughout flight training. You
yeah,
might have a rating that you do better in, and you're just like, man, I'm really getting this.
no,
But there's gonna be times when you're like kind of defeated. Like
mhm,
you drive home in silence, just like, man, I don't know. Like this is a lot. But then just be persistent,
yeah.
persevere.
Yeah, I see a lot of people gain those skills
Yeah.
through the program, so that's pretty awesome. Uh, Cole, thank you for joining
No,
us
thank you.
here on Pilots Say What, where we get to hear what pilots have to say. It's been a pleasure talking to you and getting to know you. I'm sure there's going to be more to know, and also I'd like to know more about what goes on in your flight training journey or your journey to getting to the airlines. Again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you guys on the next episode of Pilots Say What, where we get to hear what pilots have to say. Thank you.